Very nice. So thank you all for coming. We had a really short turnaround with the room, I think, today. They had the sessions crammed together pretty tight, so we've been up here scrambling to get just the basic AV functionality working. So I very much appreciate you all staying to the bitter end and hanging out with us for this last session. We're really looking forward to doing this session for you. So we're going to get rolling pretty quick here. We got a very sort of tightly packed agenda for this session. I think we'll find that we're going to need to be moving right along. So I'm going to try to stick with a script that's going to keep me from going off into the weeds. It's a 400-level session, so it sort of assumes some familiarity with Project Server. So just show of hands, how many of you guys are in the midst of a Project Server implementation, have it implemented, have been using it for a while? Project, very nice. Okay, so if I say PDPs and deep, things like that, you'll all be with me. I'll try to remember to clarify those acronyms, but it'll be great to have some level of familiarity. Question, just to get a show of hands, how many of you have ever been frustrated with timesheets on any level in any point in your career? Yeah, okay, that's good. That's what I expected to see. I mean, we've been working with this product, and we've seen people struggle with timesheeting for a while. There's a number of reasons. If I had to lead the witness, I could say that there's just about 15 or 20 reasons why people have found frustration with timesheets. Either the UI is difficult to work with, or they've been asked to move from one time reporting system to another, and it's difficult to do the transition, or they just don't see the value in it. They're not sure why they're doing this and why they're being asked to report time. So there's a lot of reasons why people find frustration with time reporting. Really, the focus of this session is going to be to get you to walk out of here with and have a slightly different mindset for what timesheets are capable of in Project Web App. That's if Dux Raymond Sy told us that people will remember about 25% of what you said in 2-3 days. So he said they might remember 45 things that you said in your session. If you are like me and you only remember one thing that I said today, I would say that would be just, I would want you to walk out with a different mindset for how PWA can be enabled, configured, tweaked, updated to allow you to manage work the way you want to manage work, to deal with regulatory requirements, to do things that out of the box you wouldn't think it could do. In fact, out of the box it doesn't do. We'll talk about what it does out of the box a little bit, but we're going to spend more time talking about things we can do to make it more effective. I've got Mark Nygaard with me today. He did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of building this integration, this customization, and he's here to answer technical questions. The session's really aligned more around business value and that kind of thing, but we wanted to touch a little bit on the development aspects of it too. So I wanted to ask a question. Are there any developers in the room? Several. Okay, good. So we'll talk a little bit about it. We're not going to be showing code snippets. I don't want to lose the audience while we look at JavaScript. But we will talk a little bit about some of the underlying technologies that are being used to make this happen. And we're certainly going to stay afterwards and answer questions. So I would kind of suggest, questions we hold them to the end, because we're going to have a pretty busy session. So welcome to the project conference and the final day. The title you're probably well familiar with. I kind of struggled with how long I made that title, and I thought people might fall asleep while they're reading it, but I felt like I had to get the message out there too. I've been around a long time doing this kind of work. I won't bore you with the details. Some of this stuff is just going to be great if you happen to download the deck. Milestone, we're all about implementing top to bottom, everything around implementing Microsoft Project Server, EPM, EPPM. So hopefully you got a chance to come by our booth at 310. We enjoyed the chance to be in the exhibit hall, and hopefully, as I recognize some of you and noticed that some of you had been by, which is great. So, session objectives. First one's pretty obvious. It's pretty much mirrors the title of the session. I want you to walk out here with an idea about how I could potentially take Project Web App in my organization and make it work better, whether it's for driving adoption for people, for team members, or whether it's trying to do more with it as a business tool. So in addition, you're going to get a chance to see and learn how to really think differently about what it's capable of, handle regulatory requirements for timesheeting, improve work management capabilities. There's some really interesting work management bits that we've done for our client. Centralize and improve finance data and capabilities. So how do we kind of make finance more efficient? That's another great way to drive adoption, right? Make finance's life better, make team members' lives better. Those are all things we're looking for. And improve the transition and migration to those timesheets for the majority of the people in the project organization. So that's every team member, right? It's 90+% of the people that are part of your project organization are going to be affected by timesheets. So if we can make timesheets easier and better, it's another driver for adoption. And it's a customer sat, employee sat, kind of solution sat kind of statistic. Okay? So our agenda. So this is an actual implementation for a real customer. I was asked to kind of leave their name out of here. So we're going to be Contoso today. So I met some of you have heard the word Contoso before. So if you want to think of me as Pradeep or Steve Masters, that's all good. So I'm going to try really hard to say Contoso and not my client's name through this whole thing. And it's really about data security and privacy for them. They're a healthcare company. We'll go through their overview in a minute. So we're going to talk about regulatory compliance in Project Web App timesheets. And this is something that I think if you're a healthcare company or other companies that have regulatory requirements, we're going to be talking specifically about CMS regulations and how we're able to meet those within Project Web App. We're going to talk about work management. As I mentioned before, there's some great work management functionality that allows finance to control how projects get charged and who they get charged to and when they get charged. And it's really important in a regulatory environment where things are on government contract basis that time doesn't get charged out one day after that contract ends. And how do we do that in a timesheet effectively and consistently? We'll talk about how finance is also able to really manage their weekend and month-end closing periods way more effectively than they were doing before, where they're not using as many paper artifacts and spreadsheets and Word docs. We'll talk about the team member experience last. It's certainly not least, just some user ease of use functionality that we brought over from the incumbent time reporting system because we felt they were really interesting features, and we knew if we brought them over, it would make the team members' transition easier. And then we're going to do summary and Q&A. I do ask that you hold questions till the end. I'll try to ask questions of you guys and get some feedback, but we're going to stay on a pretty tight leash for this session. So we start off with the overview of Contoso. And they are really all about providing services to Medicare, and they really work with Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B across a bunch of states in the USA. And as you see, Medicare Part A is about hospitals and clinics. Medicare Part B is doctor visits, lab tests, outpatient services, things like that. So it covers a lot of medical services. The contracts that they're awarded to do this work are absolutely government contracts, and so they've got a lot of regulatory oversight. The reason they chose to implement EPPM, I got 7 bullets here, and these bullets came out of our envisioning and planning process that we did with them, where we talked to executives and sponsors and senior leadership and get to the core of what is the list of critical success factors for this implementation. What is it that leadership's looking to get out of that? We knew when we walked in the door that the number one thing was resource demand and capacity analysis. They needed to be able to analyze resource utilization and things like that, and they had really no tools. Like most of the clients we talked to, they're working with spreadsheets and 2-week-old data and having a really hard time having a useful resource capacity planning meeting. You usually walk out frustrated trying to make decisions on old data. So they're in the same boat, and it's a very prevalent scenario. So that was their number one, absolute number one. In fact, it was kind of the thing we were supposed to be helping them get done. But when we also surveyed management and leadership, we found that they were also really interested in demand management. And it wasn't even on their radar screen when we started having the conversation, but it became an important piece too, as you'll be able to see. They were highly interested in improving the integration with other applications in the enterprise, and we're firm believers at Milestone that an integrated project server environment is much better than a non-integrated one. We think there's great opportunities to integrate with health, with HR systems, with finance systems, with things like that. It just makes the whole application more tightly integrated, and it makes the organization a better organization. They wanted to improve change control management, project management practices, and visibility. So these are all really nice things, right? They all kind of go well together. We like the little constellation of project management stuff at the bottom, schedules and better practices, and visibility. So these are the top 7 things. Not all things of these 7 are going to get done in phase 1, but it's on the radar screen, and some of these will roll into phase 2. So a nice set of goals. So in that whole scenario, timesheets are a big deal for 2 reasons. One, because they're a big deal to Contoso, but also because you can't get at resource management and demand capacity information without timesheets. You can't do % complete tracking in your organization and have some sense of who's working on what, when, and when they're available and when they're not. So most of you probably would raise your hand if I said, are you kind of getting at? In fact, I'll ask the question: Are those of you who are implementing or have implemented, is resource management something that was of value to you, and it's something that you guys were going after as well? Just raise your hand if you. Okay, so you know that timesheets are a big deal there, and you need to capture 40 hours a week on a resource-by-resource basis to understand if they have availability and capacity. They affect the majority of the people in a deployment, as we mentioned before, so it's a sad issue. And timesheets at Contoso also enable work management, so it's a big deal we'll show you about when we get to the work management demo. So they're able to really, and when I say work management here, really what I'm talking about is managing all those non-project bits, right? So things that aren't projects, but they are long-running tasks. Every organization we work with has bucket tasks that they log things to, maintenance and support and legacy support, all those types of things. They've got hundreds of them here, and they need to be also controlled kind of from a regulatory perspective. So work management was very important to them. And kind of lastly, the EPPM timesheet really does serve two masters, as again, I think all of you probably know. It serves project managers for keeping projects up to date. The PMs that are working at Contoso are able to keep their projects up to date on a weekly basis. And they're also able to support all the finance bits. So finance can pull hours every week, and we can generate an extract for them that they can send up to our application to do financial reporting and drive some general ledger functionality for them as well. So these PWA extensions that we've implemented now really also centralize and really make finance's job easier. They used to have lots of spreadsheets and Word documents and emails, and now a lot of that's been centralized down to Project Web App. So Project Web App is really their portal to do weekend closes and month-end closes and drive that reporting data up to their reporting system. And I'll show you that in quite a bit of detail. So the labor reporting policy is really intense. We've implemented this solution at hundreds of places, but this is the most intense labor reporting policy we've come across. And it's all about the government regulatory perspective, right? I'm not going to read this to you. I highlighted a few things that look kind of scary. You can read these on your own, but essentially, if you take nothing else away from these two slides, it should be that labor reporting at Contoso is not optional, and there's no sense of humor about it. They're really about, it has to be done, and it has to be very accurate. So I brought these up. I'm slamming them up on the screen, but you've seen words like litigation and subpoena and legal documents and such. It's really important. So they impress upon all the employees there that time reporting is extremely important, and you're responsible for understanding the nature of the work you're doing and reporting it to accurate tasks, not just grabbing something off insert row and dumping time on it. It's a big deal. And they spend a lot of time in finance validating all that stuff. So at a high level then, some high level points, that labor policy goes on and on. I just wanted to give you some snippets of it. Some things that are important. Well, they have to report time daily. It's not kind of a, wouldn't it be nice if we reported time daily? I know I'm one of these guys who I'd like to report my time daily. I kind of see the value in it, but every week on Sunday at about midnight, I'm trying to get my timesheet done for Monday morning because at our company, our office manager runs a report of who didn't get their timesheets in and sends out nasty grams. So I'd like to have them in, but I'm just not, seems like I'm never quite organized enough. But at Contoso, it's a daily requirement. So at noon on Tuesday, you need to have your Monday hours in, or there'll be consequences, basically. Exempt employees have one set of reporting requirements, and non-exempts have another. So we'll talk about that. We'll show you kind of how they both work and how they were both handled. No employee in the organization can approve their own timesheet. They have to have someone else approve it. No sense of humor about that either for some reason. And you can't pre-complete or pre-transmit. Labor hours cannot be reported in the future. So you can't do your timesheet on Monday and kind of just get ready to submit it on Thursday or Friday. It doesn't work for them. So now we're going to get into this regulatory compliance thing. And what I'm going to do is kind of set the stage by saying, what is it about regulatory compliance that was in the business requirements list, if you will? What were we going to solve? What problems do we have? So they do work via Medicare contracts. So CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services regulations really drive a lot of what they do. There's a lot of audits going on inside of Contoso. At all times, I was told a stat that at any given day there's 3 or 4 audits going on inside that company. Just people, they're getting audited about everything, and timesheets and things like that are certainly a part of that. It's subject to CMS regulations, as I mentioned, and so replacing their incumbent work time management system required that PWA honor these specific things. Time has to be reported daily. It's illegal to report hours in the future. You cannot report labor hours for Friday today. If you try to report labor hours for Friday, it's not acceptable. So the PWA timesheet has to enforce that. And then finally, finance has to have the ability to open up a timesheet in a closed period for one person without affecting everybody else. And if those of you who know a bit about Project Web App know that timesheets are open and closed manually, but they're also done on a weekly basis for all. So if you open up a time period, everybody could get their timesheet open. So it's absolutely not an option for Contoso to have an entire time reporting period open up just because one person has to move 8 hours from one task to another. So we need to have a way to solve that problem. Okay, so what is hard about this out of the box? Well, in Project Web App, in all versions of Project, actuals have been the 900-pound gorilla. They go where they want. They do what they want. Project has never tried to govern it and tell you that you didn't work 14 hours on Sunday or 27 hours on Monday. You can type in whatever you want. You can go to the timesheet settings and configuration bits in server settings, and you can do some things in terms of limiting hours and saying max hours in a day is X and minimum hours is Y, but you can't limit everything that needs to happen from Contoso's perspective. So they've always had the reaction that if someone's working, they should be able to punch their hours in. That's, in fairness, that's a pretty good way to go. We've been big fans of that as well. There's no easy mechanism for a resource manager, which is called a team lead at Contoso, to deal with an out-of-office person's timesheet. And we'll talk about this. I'll show you that from a demo perspective. Team members have the ability in Microsoft Project to review submitted and approved timesheets, but they don't have any way to get in the middle, without delegation, get in the middle of a person's active timesheet and do anything useful for them. And for us, trying to manage delegation on a global scale, it means somebody has to go in and set these delegations up, and that gets pretty twitchy, so we thought that was not a great solution. And of course, as I mentioned before, there's no way to limit, to provide this particular functionality of allowing a single timesheet to be opened in a closed period. There's also no out-of-the-box options for pulling data from external applications, external line of business applications. And we'll show you several things that we needed to pull from line of business apps within this solution to make it work. So let's try and get this demo on the road here and see if I can pull this off. Pardon? Come on. Yeah. So I'm going to do, the first demo is going to be on regulatory compliance. So we're going to talk about, it's not going to be all of the regulatory compliance bits, but it's going to be the major one, which is how do we stop people from entering time tomorrow? Something, there's just no easy way to do it out of the box. There is no configuration setting in server settings that says, prevent time reporting in the future. So let's go to timesheets. For which? Let's go look real quick. I'm going to make this a quick look because we're going to have to stay on target, but timesheet settings are default. Right there. Yeah, allow future time reporting.
Well, however, there's another requirement that he'll get into later where...
Okay, this is in future timesheets, so that's the distinction here. So this wouldn't prevent you from logging time on Friday, for example, right now. So you could log time on Friday, you just can't do it in future time reporting periods. Okay? So this wouldn't have gotten us past the regulatory requirements there. Anybody?
So there's still other requirements that even certain tasks can be closed out within a period.
Actually, you know what? That's something we'll check on. But you're right. There's at least a couple of the requirements that would have still made this not quite get the job done. But thank you for pointing that out. I should have known that, technically, right? Okay. So let's get out of here and go back. We'll go to timesheets. So we're going to do most of this today as me. Makes it easier. I'm a team member in this particular case. I'm also going to be putting on a finance admin hat and showing how we go in and out of finance admin functionality to take care of some of their requirements. So basically, this is my current timesheet, and you'll see that I've got my time punched in dutifully for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. That's kind of a miracle in itself, right? So that's good. I did that, and today I can still enter time, but I can't enter time tomorrow. So it'll lock me out of entering time tomorrow. We also had to control other things like this leave time bit here is non-working time that comes from an external line of business system. So this data is always read-only for us. We can never type in this, but when there's hours of leave time on our timesheets, it'll come from the external line of business system. It gets populated here on a weekly basis. So if I go to that system, and it's a requirement for Contoso to log their time in an external system because they keep track of their leave time balance, and they have FMLA considerations and things like that that did not make it okay for them to do this inside a Project Web App. So they log their leave time out externally. It gets rolled in here, and no matter what time period you're in, you won't be able to enter time here. So the other thing we're doing is making sure that we can prevent people from managing or entering time in previous periods. Now, that's obviously doable in Project Web App. You can simply go in and close those periods by hand. We're doing it instead by pure business logic. So we call this dynamic cell locking. Every cell in this timesheet is being controlled basically by software, by business logic, so we can do the right thing. And I can show you that by going into service settings. If we go to time reporting periods, you'll see that every time period in this server is open. We've got 52 time periods set up for 2012, and they're all wide open because we're not going to control them this way. We want to leave them open, and we'll let the software and the business logic dictate what's open and what's closed. And by the time you leave here, I think you'll have a better sense for all the different things that are required that and made that a good solution. So again, time periods in the past are locked. They can be closed manually by the finance administrators, or they will get locked down at 5 o'clock on Monday afternoon if they don't lock it themselves. So we've got a lot of different levels of controls to make sure that timesheet periods get locked appropriately. Okay. Just check my notes and see if I had anything else. So in preparation for the work management demo, I'm going to go in and show you guys a little bit of finance admin functionality here, and then I'm going to have Mark chat for a bit here about technical bits. So finance admins need to occasionally open timesheets that are locked. And as we saw, let me just go back and make sure we all are agreeing on this. If I go back to my current timesheet, and I'm going to go into the previous period and show you that, again, that it's all locked down. So this is, as you notice, two things I want to mention. Every time we switch timesheets, we have to run off and get data from an external system. There's things like, on the status line up here, you'll see very familiar things like status, total, and period. But we also have this extra line here with exempt hours total and grand total hours. Well, what is that? Well, exempt employees, of which the majority of the people at Contoso are, have one set of time reporting requirements, as I mentioned, and non-exempts have another. For exempt employees, they have a total number of hours they're expected to work, and what their time reporting requirements are is that they log at least that many hours on their timesheet each week, and if they don't, they won't be able to submit their timesheet. So we have to go get that. We also go collect what their resource cost center is, so we know who they work for, and that drives which departmental tasks or these bucket types tasks they actually have access to. So those things all do change sometimes. Sometimes their exempt hours total changes. Sometimes their resource cost center changes. I'm sure you're all familiar with people changing departments and things like that in an organization. It happens on a daily basis. So we go, for each timesheet period, we go get fresh data from that line of business system to help us do the right thing on the timesheet. So as I navigate backward here to last week, I'll just repeat this little bit of a demo and say that everything's really locked down. Can't enter time on anything here because it's a closed period. Okay. So what do I do if I'm finance and let's say that someone looked at my timesheet and said, "Hey Dave, you misreported some time here. This 4 hours needed to be on a different task." Then what they would do as a finance administrator is come down to service settings and click on timesheet adjustment, which is the way that people who approve timesheets interact with it, right? And timesheet approvers usually get a view like this that says, "Show me the timesheets that have been approved and submitted." And in this case, it's also showing unsubmitted timesheets, but I can't do anything with them. There's no hyperlinks here, where if I show approved and submitted timesheets, I can actually interact with those. As an approver, I could open it, right? Well, we needed to be able to have finance get at an open time period, a closed time period, or an open time period, ostensibly. So we've provided some additional functionality. And up here on the ribbon, there's a button called Finance History, which is a button that's only available for finance administrators. If you're not a finance admin and you come to the timesheet adjustment page, you won't have access to this toolbar button. But in clicking on that, then, they get a list of all the timesheets that are out there for this particular week. And we tried to clean the data up so that we weren't looking at tons and tons of data and scrolling. And the only two timesheets are Mark's and mine. So for week 11, which is the week I actually care about, that's last week, 3/12 through 3/19, I can look at both these timesheets, but I could also see their status, and I can click on them. They are hyperlinks. So you could say, well, that's a good thing or a bad thing. But in fact, if I click on my timesheet now, I'm in a situation that Microsoft would probably say, this is probably not a great idea, Dave, because you could go in, the timesheet manager, the finance person could actually go edit this timesheet. Well, the process is going to be at Contoso that they never do that. What they are going to do, though, is they're going to get at some of this additional functionality that they need to do to manage the finance side of the house. One of those is to open that single time sheet up for one person in a closed period. So all that I have to do as a finance administrator is click on Post Closings. We'll get this suspense time and talk about that in a bit. And a dialog box comes up saying, email notifications have been sent to you, to the finance admin, to also the team member and the team member's resource manager, their team lead, letting them know that this timesheet's now open for that person to make a change. So that's it. I close that, and I'm done. So when we get to the next, when we get to the work management demo, I'll come back in and show you how, or the finance demo, I'll come back in and show you how we will take that to the next step. For now, I think we've kind of dealt with some of the regulatory requirements pieces I wanted to cover. So I'm going to click back on Project Center, and I want to have Mark talk just a little bit about some of the technical aspects of what we did to enable pulling data from that line of business system, as well as dealing with the timesheet. How are we able to get in there and manage the timesheet the way we did? And before he steps up, I need to say, from my perspective, kudos to Microsoft in a big way on what they did to make timesheets more functional in 2010. From 2007, absolutely. It's a huge upgrade. And so we think that was wonderful, but what's even more wonderful probably is the amount of customization you can do with them now. The 27 timesheet was pretty locked down. It'd be kind of like going out to your car to open the hood and put some oil in and finding the hood welded shut. That's kind of how it worked, right? So in 2010, we've got the ability to pop the hood open and do a lot. And so a lot of things we're doing here were done via some of these technologies that I'd like to have Mark address.
Yeah, so all the customizations on the timesheet are just modifications to the JS grid, doing a lot of JavaScript, using some of the APIs that were provided in the grid control itself. And then what we do is, for all this information, we go out and get data for the week every time someone hits that timesheet. So we call a WCF application from JavaScript, and then that application actually goes out and calls some proprietary applications, other web services running where we can go and talk to these other systems to get people's leave time and also find out the type of employee they are. And then Dave is going to get into one type of employee. It's almost like they're punching a time clock. It's a little bit of a simplification, but then they have to match those hours exactly. So every time they hit the timesheet, we go get that information because that thing can be updated, more or less in real time, and they need to account for that on a daily basis. So that's really all the timesheet customizations, and just real high level touching on the technology there. And then we have a whole series of different SharePoint application pages that are tied directly into Project Server for doing some of the other things that Dave's going to show. And I think I'll certainly answer more questions later, but just wanted to give everyone an idea that we're not modifying any of the existing stuff on Project Server. These are all things that we could pull this customization out and we'd still have an out-of-the-box solution if we wanted to. So we've really tried hard and have succeeded in following the rules for doing a customization as far as Microsoft likes you to do them.
Right. Thank you. That works. Okay, so moving on. So work management's the next thing we're up on. Again, this is all about managing those long-running bucket tasks, things that are not projects. So what are the business requirements on this one? So they have really complex requirements for managing departmental tasks. We'll get into some of that when we show the demo in terms of charge information for them and dates that are effective and things like that. So it's not just as simple as somebody publishes a plan called support and lets people hack away at it. There's quite a bit more going on there. They're long-running bucket-type tasks, as we mentioned. They tend to be set up on a yearly basis, essentially. And they're not assigned to people directly. So finance doesn't assign them to individuals. They assign them to cost centers, resource cost centers. So people are all assigned to a resource cost center. As I mentioned before, we pull that data when you go from timesheet week to timesheet week, so we make sure we know what's appropriate for you. But that changes at times. And so instead of them assigning those things to individuals and doing task assignments, they want to say, these 6 resource cost centers have access to this departmental task, no one else. So we had to provide some way for them to do that. And it takes them up a level as well from having to do actual assignments. They carry effective start and end dates, and this is hugely important. So the day that a regulation or a contract ends is the last day that you can report time to these these long-running tasks. These tasks will be around for the whole year. And in fact, some cost centers will have access to those for longer than other cost centers. So on an individual basis, those cost centers can each have different sort of end dates for those things. They carry charge information again. There's 3 bits of charge information that are important to Contoso that all have to be attached to these. And only finance admins can update that charge information. So that becomes another important point to talk about. Then there has to be a request process for team members to be able to go ask for new things that they don't already have and get that approved or rejected in an effective way. And then, of course, corporate projects can be split across multiple cost centers. So we'll talk at some point about a user interface we built to allow them to assign cost center distributions so that projects can be paid for by more than one cost center. So what are the challenges out of the box? Well, managing work items effectively is always difficult. It's always kind of difficult for organizations to manage the whole process of, should we make these admin tasks or should we publish project plans? It's definitely a challenge. Closing tasks to updates, we're going to talk about how that isn't really an effective way to manage these close dates for tasks. So, for example, a departmental task might end on a Wednesday. And what does that mean? Well, that means on Thursday I shouldn't be able to report time to it. So what is the PM's job there might be to go use closed tasks to updates and try to make that work. But that tends to work more on a weekly basis, and it's difficult to do that and manage that on a day-to-day basis. Okay? There's limitations with EPM custom fields when we're talking about things like charge information that only finance has access to. So as you all know, enterprise custom fields are enterprise custom fields, and if you make an enterprise project custom field, every PM will see it on their list, unless it's departmental. Of course, that's to be the one way you could filter, but you can get around that too. You can open a project plan and say, hey, I'm part of Department X, and go look at their bits, and then say I'm part of Department Y. So it's not a way to lock things down. So what we did there was we pulled some of that stuff out of custom field data and did it in another way. And there's no out-of-the-box option for initiating workflow from the timesheet. This is another important point. Those of you who have worked with the demand, raise your hand if you've used demand management functionality in Project 2010. So enterprise project types and PDPs and using the new button up on the project center to initiate projects. So the workflow that's built into project, where it intersects with SharePoint workflow, is through that new button. And it's through PDPs and phases and stages. There's no way to get at a workflow and get a workflow running off of a timesheet. But where we needed the team member to have access to it was on the timesheet. It's going to be when they're reporting time that they realize, hey, there's a departmental task that I should be charging to that I don't have access to, or I need to put on my timesheet. So I need to go request that while I'm on my timesheet, not go back to Project Center and click on the new button, which would actually only help them kick off a new project. So we did some interesting things there in terms of getting workflow initiated from a timesheet. So we'll pop back over and get to the demo again here. Okay, so from the Project Center, you'll notice there's a couple things that you wouldn't have seen before. If you have, you'll have to come talk to me afterwards. One is the DPT Task Manager. So this is basically a SharePoint application page that we built to allow them to manage those bucket tasks. And I'm going to spend a minute or two on this because there's a lot going on here. This is pretty intense. I'm going to try to get through this and not have you guys heads spinning off. There's going to be, I think by the time you leave here, your brains might be tired, and if I'm going too fast, just have me slow down. But we have a lot to cover, and so really it doesn't matter whether you understand every little nuance on these pages, but just the bigger picture of kind of what have we done to kind of make things work better for them. So what I've got here is a fairly complex page, and it shows departmental projects over on the right. There's hundreds of them here. They all have charge cost centers, and then resource cost centers are assigned to them. We've got some requests here. We'll get to that in a bit further down. But essentially, when you pick a project up here, then down below, you're going to get some additional information about that project. You'd have a place where you could create a new one. So if you need to create a new project, here's what finance does. They type a new project name in. They pick the charge cost center that's going to pay for it. They pick these three pieces of information that are what constitute the charge information for that project, and it's all extremely important that they get it right. And then they can pick start and end dates, and they can just click the button here. And those of you who know about the PSI know that it's pretty easy in the PSI to go make a call and create a project. So we take that information, we pass it along, we create this new project for that. If they want to update a project and change the end dates for it, they can simply come down here and, again, pick it up top. We're at DPT 0005 Division 1 IT support. That's the project we have selected at the top. And then down here, they've got this option to update some of the information. They could change the start and end date, labor code, some of that stuff, and click update. Might help me to get some real estate back here. Oh, I can't do that. Never mind. Sounded like a good idea. And then finally, down at the bottom, we've got the tasks that make up this project. So down here, we're looking at all the tasks that are part of this project. So these tasks got built again in this editor. They didn't have to go in and create a project plan and do it themselves. They just built the tasks within the editor. And then within each one of these tasks, this keeps getting more interesting, there are cost centers assigned. So when I click on the arrow for any one of these particular tasks in this departmental project, I can see all the cost centers that are assigned. And remember, this is not people. It's people that are part of a group. So think of it as groups of people. So how do I get that done? Well, it would have been pretty obnoxious to have to go in and build a task and then add each cost center one after another. You'd probably want to take yourself out behind the woodshed in doing that. So what we did is we built them an interface where they can either add a single cost center by simply picking a start and end date for that cost center and then clicking the plus sign, or if they want to, they could click the double plus sign here, and they can paste in a whole bunch of cost centers and then simply change the start and end dates for those and hit OK. And what happens then in the background is the automation code goes out and actually opens that project up and makes all the task assignments for each person in each one of those resource cost centers. So they're dealing up a level from individual people. They're dealing with these larger groups of resource cost centers and handling it that way. And they can then make adjustments to these cost centers, change the start end dates to them for those individual assignments, and everything stays on point. Okay? So that's kind of how they manage this whole process. So lastly on this UI, there's a request bit. So people can come in here and request new tasks. I'm going to show you the front end of this process in a bit. In the short term, I want to show you what the back end of it is. So as a finance administrator, again, only finance admins have access to this page. So they're going to come in here and manage departmental tasks, this whole work management piece, and they're also going to manage requests for new things. So when they get requests, they show up here. And so as part of that whole workflow process, a team member will request one. A team lead has to approve it, and if the team lead approves it, then the finance admin has to approve it before it can all get executed on. So all the finance admin really needs to do here is review this request. It's a new one. It's from Wendy Wheeler. It's for this particular project. She's in this cost center, and it's got this start and end date. And if she wants to, she can just click approve, and again, in the background, we'll go off and make those actual assignments from real people from cost center 523 to that project for her, and then emails go out saying, you've been approved for this task, and you can go off and do time reporting against it. She could also reject it and say, no thanks, not interested, and just kill it off at that point. I'll show you the front end of that process in a bit. Okay, just checking my notes here. Okay, so good. That covers pretty much covers the DPT manager screen for us. Go back to timesheet. Okay, so we're going to do a little scenario here for me. So today. I'm back to my timesheet, and realistically, I need to get my Thursday time punched in. But I'm at the project conference today, and boring you guys, so I didn't have time to get my timesheet done. So what do I do? So we're going to play the role of my finance admin or my team lead and see how they handle this via something called suspensed time. And this word suspense, I don't know if it's a real word or not, but it sure is to them. So we've made it a word of ours too. Doesn't really roll off the tongue very well. But really think of it as a surrogate time entry for a day when, again, they have to report time on a day. They can't let a day go by without reporting something. So finance admins and team leads have the ability to go in and put this sort of surrogate time on a timesheet for them. So how does that happen? So you probably have an idea since we saw that before, but we'll go back to server settings. I'm the finance administrator. I come into timesheet adjustments. And from here, I get to see, again, this page that lets me see some things, but doesn't get me quite where I need to go. So we click on finance history again as a finance administrator. And then I have the option to pick a time period. So I need to pick the current week, which is the 19th to the and it always defaults to the previous week, because a lot of times what finance is doing is they're making adjustments to last week's time periods. People will submit a time period, and then they've got to do a post-closing on it, so they really want to start with looking at last week's stuff. So this time I want to look at the current week. And you'll notice I've got a button over here called Close Period. This is where finance actually comes to make a period closed for everybody. So if they want to shut a period down on Monday at 11 o'clock because they've got all their ducks in a row and they've gone and resolved all of the missing timesheets and gotten all that done, they can close that time period on Monday at 11 if they want to, and then at that point nobody can enter time without a post-closing. And if they don't do this, if they forget, or if they just don't get the thing done on time, at 5 o'clock an automation process runs and it shuts the period down automatically. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is, as a finance admin, is click on Dave's timesheet. It's in progress. He's got 24 hours logged to it so far. And you'll notice that I've got options up here to do insert suspense time and save it. So I'm going to click insert suspense time on this toolbar ribbon button. And then a little line comes up down here below the grid for me. And basically what I can do is click on a grid like a cell like number Thursday. And I can say, look, 8 hours of suspense time are getting entered for Dave's timesheet while he's at the project conference. I can enter time for Friday if I thought Dave was going to be out sick, for example, or maybe he went out to have surgery and he wasn't going to be back for a couple weeks. So when they're done, they click Save Suspense Time, and that suspense time has now been saved to their timesheet. So let's go back in now. to my timesheet, since I'm doing all this, is wearing both hats, finance admin and team member. And you'll notice that as soon as my timesheet updates, it's going to show that suspense time. What's kind of interesting about this is this time is, I think this is kind of cool, it's not in the grid, it's below the grid. So it doesn't participate in the normal status update here. I still show 24 hours of real time, but I've got this 8 hours of suspense time hanging out down here, and we include that in this grand total hours, which includes that. So if you want to look at the total number of hours on your spreadsheet, including that stuff, it's really there as a surrogate. It's going to get replaced. You can view it that way. So there's a couple scenarios where we hang data below the grid, where it's enterprise data that's really not part of project, but it's there to show, it's there to help the team member complete his timesheet. We're going to show that with punch hours as well. So now my job as a team member will be to come in at some point, maybe it's tomorrow when I get back from the project conference, maybe it's a week later, and replace this time. I'll enter my 8 hours of real time, and as soon as I submit my timesheet, it'll automatically get removed for me. So the process that Contoso had before this was they had to do this a lot through emails, and there was an extra round trip after the person put the suspense time on there, the team lead, then the team member would come in and replace it, and then finance had to go back in, or sorry, the team lead had to go back in and remove it again, and then the team member could actually go submit their timesheet. Because one thing that's absolutely not optional for them is that they have to submit their own timesheets. They can't have their timesheets submitted on behalf by anyone else, not even the CEO. So they had to do some extra round trips. So this saved them a little bit of time, and it made the whole process easier. Okay? So suspense time, we're going to show one other thing called punch hours that also it'll live below the grid. It's other enterprise data that shows up, again, for the timesheet in the benefit of the timesheet user, but doesn't impact the grid and show up on the totals lines where it wouldn't make any sense. Okay? So we're going to do questions at the end. You got a burning question you want to ask?
Yeah, it's just before we continue. I mean, is this available as a package we can get off you guys?
I am going to talk about that at the end if you're going to be there. And whatever, what do we got? 25 minutes left, something like that. Some of these are package things, and some of these are consultative solutions. I'll talk about which ones are which.
So there is a possibility of that.
So there's what?
So that's a possibility at the end, right?
Yeah. Yep, I'll hit it on one of my slides toward the end. And I'm looking like we're about 30 minutes out, so we're doing pretty good, I think, on time here. Okay? So that's good. Just going to check my notes again. Okay, it's time to talk about punch hours. So we've done that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to log in as Mark Nygaard. He's our non-exempt employee for our demo today. So I'll click on sign in as different user. And punch in as Mark N. I'll try to do that right. So Mark's a non-exempt employee. So Mark has this additional requirement in terms of time reporting. There's an actual a punch clock application that all non-exempts have to deal with. It's kind of a software clock that lives on your desktop. When you get in the morning, you punch it. When you go to lunch, you punch out. When you get back from lunch, you punch back in. And when you leave for the day, you punch out again. And it tells you that you worked 7.95 hours or 8.12 hours or whatever it is. It gives you a real number. And basically, that number is the number that you then have to punch in for hours for the day. You have to put in that exact number of hours, or Contoso's finance folk will get annoyed with you. And it's a regulatory requirement that they do that. So we need to get that enterprise data that comes from a line of business system. It comes from a punch application on the network somewhere. The data's in Oracle, Shutter. But you know what? We're okay with that. So again, part of that whole web service that's going on when we go from timesheet period to timesheet period, it's going off and asking for leave time, and it's asking for resource cost center and your exempt hours total. If you're a non-exempt, it wants your punch hours. We put those up in the timesheet. But again, this would be bad data to put in the timesheet because your totals would be all messed up. You'd end up having 80 hours in a perfect world at the end of the week. So we roll it in as labor hours, but they're just there for the purposes of review. So I can see what my punch hours total is, and I can see what my actual hours total is. And if they're matching, then I'm in pretty good shape. And I can obviously look on a grid on a day-by-day basis and see that I'm good on Monday and Tuesday, and I'm not good on Wednesday. I've got something not quite right here. So again, my totals don't line up. And if I were to try to submit my timesheet right now, for example, it would tell me that, well, A, I don't have enough hours, and although I'm a non-exempt, so it wouldn't complain about that, but it would say your punch hours don't match. So you need to fix that before you log in. And this is an example of a validation that, again, you can't sort of configure this validation through the timesheet settings inside of PWA. It's a custom validation, and we wanted to handle it in a way that would be consistent with the way they were used to seeing things. They're used to seeing things in terms of yellow and red issues. Yellow are things that you can get away with and you need to fix at some point, and red ones are the ones you have to fix before you submit. So for example, if I'm an exempt employee and I have 35 hours and I hit submit, it's going to come back and tell me you don't have enough hours to match your exempt hours total. Please fix that, and your timesheet bar is going to turn red. Similarly here, if I were to hit send timesheet, it's going to tell me your punch hours don't match, and it tells me where they don't match, or whether actually it just tells me that the totals don't match, because that's the important part. And when I click OK, then my status bar turns red, telling me. Usually when you see this in PWA and it says error, you're like, oh no, what happened to my timesheet, right? You're hating it. Here, if you just simply make the change, and maybe I come in here and I put in 8.15 hours, or 4.15 hours rather, on this day, I can fix my problem and say, oh, I didn't realize I had such a funky number of hours, and I can tab off that, and now my totals match up and life's better. So those validations get done in real time. We log those. We have reporting that goes off of them. So finance can say, show me all the timesheets that have some kind of a validation problem that I need to go chase down. So pretty nice stuff at the end of the day. Let's make sure I'm not missing anything here. Okay, last thing I wanted to cover in here was cost center distributions. So back to Project Center. I think I'll log back in as me for this. Why not? You don't like to take new paths in demos, right? That's a no-no. I think somebody said that on stage the other day at the keynote. I think it was Ludo. Oops. Okay, so cost center distributions are, again, this way that finance can appropriately charge out projects to the appropriate cost centers. So there's a couple things that happen here. One, if you remember, DPT projects all got assigned their charge information when they were created in the DPT manager. But corporate projects they're not subject to the same UI. So we need a way, again, to be able to provide those same bits of charge information to corporate projects and keep it out of the hands of PMs and team members and things like that. So we built another SharePoint application page that shows all the corporate projects in a list. They can pick any one they want. They can come down here and choose the charge cost center and the other two items that are important. And then they can also set up distributions. So they can simply say, okay, I want to assign 50% to this cost center and 25% to cost center B and 25% to cost center C. At that point, that project will get charged out. When we pull the extract on a weekly basis, we'll appropriately take all of the totals and portion them according to the charge distribution. So again, we're taking essentially non-enterprise project or custom field data and bring it in front of the people who need to see it. And so again, PMs won't have access to this information. They can't mistakenly change it. So it takes some worry away from the finance organization. So I think that was the end of our work management demo. Yep. So I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint and get on with the next two topics. Okay, finance. So they do weekly. A lot of our clients, that when we do this type of pulling hours out of timesheets and getting them up to the general ledger, up to a time reporting app, it's kind of a monthly thing. Almost all of our clients have done monthly. They do weekly here. So it's even more important that this stuff is all works well, and they use it a lot more often. Let's just put it that way. So what are the requirements around finance? Well, they need to be able to do timesheet approvals, which is pretty standard stuff. They need to be able to review timesheets for accuracy to make sure that there aren't validation errors that are outside of what project would normally think of as validation errors, and that those people have actually, in fact, even created a timesheet for the week. All those types of things that might get lost in the shuffle. Again, all the time reporting and such is subject to CMS regulations, so they have to make sure that there aren't any violations of those. They really look closely at where hours get charged and make sure that people are charging to the right thing. They need to control closing timesheet periods. They need to open timesheets in a closed period for a single team member, as we've already talked about. They need to be able to create an extract of timesheet data rolled up appropriately and in the proprietary format. So it needs to go, in this particular case for Contoso, to a specific homegrown financial reporting application. So we need to put the data in two different files and send it off so that it can be consumed by that application, which did eliminate the need to go rewrite a whole bunch of finance reports. Right? They get to use the same reports they're already familiar with, which is a beautiful thing. And we need to support suspense time for finance admins and team leads. So both of those types of people need to be able to get in and create those suspense time entries to allow timesheets to get submitted. Because it can be that a person goes out for a week, or they're out for the latter part of a week. Their timesheet they can submit their timesheet with that suspense time, or they can leave it in an open state. But as long as it's got suspense time on it, we can report and do the report up to finance, and then we can fix those in a transaction that happens on a future time period. Okay? So what are the challenges with out-of-the-box PW8 timesheets? There's no option for opening a single timesheet in a closed period. We know that. There's no scalable, flexible options for approved personnel to interact with those in-process timesheets, right? If you go to the timesheet adjustment page and you look at things that haven't been submitted, all you can do is stare at them. You can't do anything, so you can't really get at them and interact with them in any way that's useful. There's no exception reports out of the box to find out, to chase down who hasn't created a timesheet, who hasn't submitted one. These are pretty common things that most partners probably address for most clients. No business logic enable way to open and control closing timesheet periods, right? It's got to be done very manually. There's no out-of-the-box options for producing data extracts, right? We all know this. There's no magic button where it says, just go produce me a timesheet extract that will work for everybody. There's no one-size-fits-all option anyway out there, okay? And lastly, there's no support for those complex timesheet validations that we talked about, like too many hours in a day, or you don't have enough exempt hours total type hours. Okay? Back to the demo. One of my goals was to not make you stare at PowerPoint all day, because my sense was that you'd probably sick of seeing PowerPoint slides by the time you get through 3 days of this. Okay. Let me get to the right place here, guys. Let's see. We talked about punch hours. Huh. Here we go. Actually, we did all this, didn't we? You know what? We've covered almost all of this already, which is really nice. That means we're going to make this demo really short. The topics I want to talk about here were suspense time. We covered that in the other demo. We covered we covered post-closings. So I don't know if we have anything to show here that we haven't already showed. I'm just going to double-check my notes, guys. Hey, bear with me a sec. Timesheet adjustments, suspense time. Yeah. And we did all the validations. We've covered all this, so great. I guess I got ahead of myself in the last demo, which is fine. We covered a lot of data there. I appreciate you bearing with me. So there was nothing that we haven't talked about that was on that list. I'm just going to go back over to my deck one more time here and make sure there wasn't anything that was Baird talking about in terms of that list of requirements and features. We've got some that are out there in their live environment, but didn't bring any with on this. But the ones that there's several ones that our clients always ask for. One is, show me who hasn't submitted a timesheet or who hasn't created one. The one that we don't get asked for all the time is, show me people who haven't created timesheets. And in this particular case, if you haven't created a timesheet, you won't show up on a lot of other reports, right? Like, so if you're looking for people that have timesheet issues, but you're not going to be on the report because you don't have an issue, you don't have a timesheet. So the first thing that finance does is go look for unsubmitted or uncreated timesheets. Then they look for unsubmitted ones. Then they look for ones with validation problems. So that's typically how that goes. And a lot of those are just things that can be done really quickly, either through performance point services or Excel services, or SSRS is a pretty common way of doing that. Okay. Well, I think we covered it all. So I'm going to go back and we're just going to go on to the last bit here. Okay. Any other? Well, I guess I should ask. Are any other questions on any of these topics that you? I want to make sure I didn't miss anything here.
So I do have questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I really haven't gotten a feel for is the single entry mode type of aspect of this. Can you talk about the integration with statusing?
So you could either run this in single entry mode or not in single entry mode. It'd be your choice whether you wanted to do that. I think Contoso is doing single entry mode with this, so that when they hit send timesheet, it's doing the dual functionality of also sending status updates to team members. They have a few projects that run in a fairly short time frame, especially some of the ones that go on in IT around server setup and things like that, where those PMs might have them submit updates using the send update button more often. But they're absolutely in their timesheet every day as a requirement, so it's pretty easy for them to do that. And for the projects they run that are agile in nature, more where they're doing scrums and they want updates, it's pretty easy for the team member just to click send update as they're filling out their timesheet and then save, right? But when they hit send timesheet, it does handle both. So there's no way it doesn't obviate the one versus the other. Okay. Let's go do the last bit, and then we can have some time for Q&A, and I'll be on time, which is really cool. So team member, the last bit of this was really about making team members' lives easier. Did you have something? Oh, okay. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Making their lives easier, making it easier for them to adopt this timesheet versus the one they used to have. So the user experience is important to us. And as I mentioned before, timesheets touch everybody, and we think that in every one of our implementations, timesheets are a critical adoption piece. We're really huge believers in enabling project managers to really understand the tool at a high level, and a very effective level, rather. And then also we want to make timesheets easy, because if we can do that, it just helps adoption happen. So time reporting is subject to CMS regulations. I heard repetition is the key to retention, so I've said this about 8 times now. The incumbent time reporting tool is highly customized to handle CMS regulations, as we've talked about. The incumbent time reporting tool had some really useful ease-of-use features that we thought were really kind of neat and should be in Project Web App, and maybe they will be in a future version. And so we brought those over. And it obviously needed to include data from PeopleSoft HR. So the incumbent time application would go get information from PeopleSoft. Well, we've got a PeopleSoft integration that's going to come up at Contoso in the next phase. But in the short term, the data we cared about was already in their time reporting solution. And we had to go get data out of there anyway, like leave time. So it was easy for us to get that data out of the time reporting application, and we will solve the problem of get it directly from PeopleSoft HR in about Q3 this year when we complete the PeopleSoft HR integration with project. And the nice thing about that, if you've ever been involved with one of those or not, is that when we do the integration of PeopleSoft HR, then the job of updating custom fields and things like that from a resource record perspective, which can happen quite a bit, and especially in a larger deployment, goes to zero, because on a nightly basis, this application runs. It looks at each resource and gets their latest PeopleSoft HR data, and if there's any changes in department, manager, anything about that hierarchy, we make those changes on a nightly basis. So on every morning, we are square with what's getting punched into HR. So it's a more effective thing than trying to do it versus Active Directory, for example, where not every company's got the ability to update their AD to match what's going on in HR. Sometimes that AD stuff gets really dicey. So you can do AD syncs with project, but it doesn't always grab everything. It doesn't handle RBS, and it doesn't handle some things that you might want. So the direct one-on-one... Are you pulling rates? Never. Haven't done it yet. We've yet to find an HR department that thought it was going to be okay to have actual rates in Project Server, because there's really no way to hide them from people again, right? It's resource data. If you can go to the resource center, you can pull up a resource and you can see what their rate is. So all of our clients have always traditionally done burden rates, and we're big fans of that in that scenario. So we pull the things that we're able to get at. So a lot of times it comes through a extract that we get and we process, or it's a public view that's handled by PeopleSoft. So it's not like we get to open access to their data and go, let's pull the stuff we want to get. We get what we're really expected to have and given access to. Does that make sense? Yeah. Good question, though. The question, by the way, was, and I know for the recording, I'm going to encourage people to hit the mic at the end. The question was, do we pull resource rates out of PeopleSoft in those scenarios? And the answer is absolutely not. Hasn't happened yet. And of course, their existing time reporting app handled punch hours in that whole process. So challenges for us out of the box were we couldn't support their regulatory environment. We couldn't support pulling enterprise data. There was no easy way to configure that via server settings. Couldn't support timesheet favorites or task by date comments. These are these two little features I want to show you that are going to take us about 2 minutes or so to demo. They're pretty easy to demo. So let's go over and demo these. And then I also want to show you one more thing about regulatory requirements for time reporting, which will take another 30 seconds. So here we go. Last time we're swapping. Oh, actually, that's not true. I have to go back to the deck, don't I? All right, so timesheet again. You probably noticed a few things on here that you might have been wanting to raise your hand and ask questions about. We're going to cover those right now. There's some extra toolbar buttons up here on the ribbon that you probably haven't seen before. And there's a little star over here in the left column, and there's on my previous timesheet, my previous week's timesheet, there's a yellow notepad-looking thing on my timesheet. Oh, by the way, do you remember way back in Demo 1 when we went and did that post-closing, and I said we'll get back to that later? So I wanted to show you that as a consequence of me doing that post-closing. This is my previous week's time period now. This is not my current week's time period, but when I set that post-closing up, I would get an email saying, hey, your timesheet's open for editing for the week of 3/12. So in fact, it is open. I can come in here and maybe I could finish doing my time reporting for this week, which I hadn't completed. So I only have 4 hours here on Tuesday and Wednesday, and I could come in here and say, look, I was working on this project dimension. It's part of the extract. I did 4 hours in these 2 days, and I can update that where before we did the post-closing, this timesheet was locked. So that's one thing. The other two things I really wanted to cover, and so that and one other thing I'll show you on my current timesheet before we leave. So what is favorites? Well, favorites is a way for them to simplify their lives. Anything we can do to make timesheet users' lives easier is great. How many of you have been in a situation where either on 2010 or on 2007, you'd go to add a task to your timesheet and they see this just gigantic list of tasks that you had to scroll through, right? And they might have been sorted, but I think in 2007 they might not even have been sorted. So it was kind of a quality of life thing to have to go find a task to put in your timesheet. So what was going on in the previous time reporting system is they had this thing called favorites, and you could manage those favorites and say, what are my favorite tasks? Well, a lot of times the departmental tasks are the ones that are really annoying because there really are thousands of tasks, and you might only report time to 2 or 3 of them a lot, right? The work you do is always about these couple. So you put them in your favorites, and it might be even an administrative category that's not on the timesheet all the time. So those things end up in your favorites list. You can add and subtract that as you see fit, and then you can simply add favorite tasks to your timesheet, pick the ones you want, or even easier, fire up your timesheet and click Add All Favorites. Now, and the reason that the departmental tasks are great candidates for this, and in your organization they might be called something else, support and maintenance tasks. They typically get scheduled out with 0 hours of work, and they get scheduled out with 0 hours of work because it's not a predictive thing, and you don't have schedule work necessarily in those things. You just want to have a bucket to log time to. So they get set up with 0 hours work, and because of that, they'll never show up on your timesheet when you create a new one. Microsoft Project Web Apps rules for that are project tasks that you've started but haven't finished, that have assignments in the current period, things like that. I'll get to you in just a moment, if that's okay. So those DPT tasks are beautiful things to have in your favorites. So you can just slap them on your timesheet all at one time. Okay. I also promised to cover the front end of the request process. So let me do that while I'm here. I'm going to go to my current timesheet. I'll stay here. So I can use the insert row, and you guys are familiar with insert row, and you're probably familiar with insert task and create new task and add yourself a task. What's new here is for us is you have the ability to insert a departmental task. So those are those tasks that got created by the DPT manager. I have the ability to request one that I don't already have access to, and I've got the ability to request closing one, meaning I don't need this one anymore. I'd like you guys to close it down for me. So inserting a DPT task, you can simply go look at it, and what you get is a filtered list, so things that you have access to for your cost center. You don't have to look at this giant list of things and find them. It's just these couple things. So I can pick those, and I can place them on my timesheet pretty readily. And if I want to set up a request, maybe I'm reporting my time, I need to finish my timesheet right now, but I don't have the task I want. So I can click Request DPT Task, and that will bring up a dialog box showing all the departmental tasks that our cost center, my cost center, is not part of. And I can pick one that I think is really mapping to what I'm doing, send off a request to have my team lead approve it. And this is using workflow again, right? So now we're actually going to initiate a workflow through SharePoint workflow to get this workflow process done in a real workflow fashion. So an email goes off to my team lead. My team lead can review the request, approve it or not approve it. And we use Nintex for this, by the way. And Nintex has been somebody we've repped them in on a lot of our gigs where we have a lot of workflow to do because it's easier to work in Nintex and drag and drop and build your workflows graphically than it is to go into Visual Studio and put on your geek helmet and try to write workflow that way. It's not easy stuff to do. So Nintex has been a great partner for us. We brought them in here at Contoso, and the workflow we've done is the ROI, and it's literally weeks difference between doing it that way and trying to grind it out through Visual Studio. So the request process then sends that workflow off for approval from a team lead. If it gets past a team lead, you'll remember that request area on the DPT manager. It shows up there for the finance admin, and she just looks at them and says, "You're good or you're not good. I'm going to approve it or I'm going to reject it." So it's a really nice way to get workflow done. The workflow establishing from a timesheet is again one of those things that just doesn't happen out of the box. There's some tricks and some work to do to make that happen. Lastly, we've got this yellow sort of 3M colored notepad field here, and what it is, it's a comment. So they had daily task comments, which we find great. My problem with the comment field in the timesheet has always been if I have a task like meetings, and I have to pound all my comments into the same task over here in the timesheet, it doesn't really work very well. So if I type in attended tech meeting or attended functional spec review, then it ends up with all kinds of stuff in it, and it's just not an effective way to keep track of those comments. So what they do at Contoso is they have daily comments, and if you want to log a comment for a task, you can log a comment for any task in an open timesheet. And you can just simply right-click on that task, click on comments, type in, completed version 2. Whether you're a developer, whether you're a business manager, it doesn't matter. It's always useful to be able to do that. Your task will turn yellow, so you'll know there's a comment there, and if you just hover over it, you can see the text without having to click on it, right? So it's a pretty effective way to be able to do that. These tasks are all persisted in the database in related tables. We never make any changes to any of the stock tables in Microsoft Project. That would be a really bad idea. And so if people want reports, these things are persisted. You can get them out. You know what happened, which comments are for which days, and you could pull the appropriate comments out to more of it has to be more of a task level type of report for it to make sense in general. But it's a nice, easy, simple feature that a lot of our clients really seem to like. I want to show you one more thing that's really important, and that was the gentleman who said, yeah, you can go restrict time reporting in future days. The one other business requirement that we'll never handle was this idea of departmental tasks. And if you remember before, I talked about DPTs having start and end dates and how 5 different resource cost centers might all have different start and finish dates for that task that they are contractually bound to. So in the case of the DPT Division 1 IT support, Division 1 support task, we set this up intentionally to have an end date of Tuesday. So I could come in on my timesheet. This is my current timesheet now. And I could log time to Monday or Tuesday. But if I try to log time to Wednesday, I can't. And this is probably the most beautiful thing we did for them, because they now have absolute control over the time that gets reported against all these departmental tasks, all of which are subject to regulatory requirements. So task owners just can't do the wrong thing. If they do the wrong thing, it's because finance didn't have the date right. And finance controls those end dates, so it's all on them. So again, we're using that dynamic cell locking feature to really control what you can do, and we can make the timesheet user's life kind of bulletproof and make it easy. So we've done some ease of use features. We've handled work management, tried to make that better for them, and we've really sort of made it easier for them to see data from other parts of the enterprise, sometimes in the timesheet, like leave time, that participates in the totals, sometimes not. It all makes sense, and it was all a lot of fun to do. But my goal for this whole thing, of course, was to get you, when you walk out of here, to say, wow, there's some things that I saw today that I didn't know you could do in Project Web App Timesheeting. We certainly knew we couldn't have done them in 2007. We had a couple people come to us in 2007, just as a side note, since I've got a minute. And they said, hey, we can't stand the fact that we can't even resize the timesheet cell. We can't even change we have really long named tasks. My first thought was, why don't you shorten up your task names? But they were really long, so they wanted to be able to stretch the task name field out. And they said, if we can't fix this problem, we're going to deploy something else. So our only way to fix the problem for them was to buy a grid control off the shelf, plop it down on a page, and redo their entire timesheet as a grid control thing where we had control of it, because it was locked down to the extent with DLLs in a way that it was absolutely undoable given the current timesheet. We're really thrilled with Microsoft 2010 that we have the option to do so much more with the timesheet. So in summary, and I've got about 8 minutes, and that covers Q&A, I'd love to have you walk out of here saying timesheets are way more powerful and flexible in 2010 than they were in 2007. I think we would all raise our hand and say, yep, no question. But the ability to customize and make them and integrate them has grown 10 times more than the functionality has bumped up. So we think that's even a bigger kudo to Microsoft on that. They actually opened up a lot of things for us and give us options to use the PSI, and we can do JavaScript coding, and we can do client-side object model that they support that help make our life easier there. So we want you to rethink how timesheets are deployed in your organization. If go back to your organization and think, could we do things like this? I'm not saying these exact things. These are, again, just like any other demo. They're specific to a specific client, like Contoso in this case, but the types of things might have a lot of traction in your organization. So I got a question from a gentleman who maybe left, asking what was available. So as package solutions today, you can buy timesheet favorites and cell comments by task by day. Those are really simple things. You can get to our website. I've got some links where you can go look that up. There's also a thing called top-level time reporting it allows project managers to control whether somebody can put the project name of their project on the timesheet and report time. If you're managing work breakdown structure and you've got a project and you're tracking it actively, the last thing you want is for someone to drag that timesheet, the project name onto their timesheet and log hours to it, because it'll wreck your project. The hours end up at row 0. They don't end up on the tasks that they actually got reported to. So when you're trying to manage your project, and they are hidden in many times, you can't even see that they're there. So we need to kind of control that. Out of the box from Microsoft, you can turn it off at the server level, or you can turn it on. but you can't let the PM control it. So we built this top-level time reporting feature back in 2007 to say the PM should be the one who decides whether you can report time to the top level of the project or not. Pretty cool thing. Again, small, simple, light, and fluffy. And then as consultative solutions, the timesheet initiated a workflow that we did sort of to kick off that workflow and allow task owners to request things and all that. Dynamic cell locking and unlocking. There's going to always be business requirements around that. So for us to put that together as a package solution would be like, there'd have to be in a massive configuration page where you could choose the right things because everybody's going to have their own reasons. You might not have DPT tasks with end dates, but you might want to be able to control this week versus that week or days in the future, things like that. And then lastly, hosting external data in and on the timesheet are things that we just did as a consultative solution. And again, that would be subject to all kinds of business requirements on any individual case. What data is it? Where is it coming from? Should it be in the timesheet or below the timesheet? But we think that you can resize that timesheet. You can change it. You can say, hey, I don't want to see it group by anything anymore. We were very careful to make sure that it handled all those things so that no matter what we did, that data that was below the timesheet or in the timesheet, resize it, move it around. It looks like it's part of the timesheet, but in fact, it really is living outside it. So those are things that are available as sort of consultative solutions. And so links, the slide decks are going to be available. You'll be able to pull these things down. Any of these links will get to us. Hopefully you had a chance to stop by our booth, and Milestone Consultant, www, will get you there as well. So some related sessions, and I bring these up not because you can go to them, because that ship sailed, but some of these are kind of things, especially 318 with John Francois Lasso. It would be good to see his bit on timesheets. I bet many of you went to that. How many of you went to that session? Very nice. Some of these other ones might be interesting too. Dan Ranier is with us today. His YJTJ session is always interesting. It's not a timesheet session, but it's a really fundamental session for project managers and people who use desktop project. So there's also post-conference training that Dan and a couple other folks from Milestone are doing on 178 certification. Any of you going to that? It's a 3-hour after-the-fact kind of thing. It helps you get an idea of what's required for certification if you're looking for your 178 certification. So we've got some time for Q&A. Mark and I will stand up here as long as we can. But I want to thank you so much for coming and spending your last bits of the project conference with us, and hopefully this was helpful. Thank you. Just a quick question to you guys. Was this useful? Was this interesting? Okay, thank you very much. And so, again, whether the questions are kind of very technical or very much business-related focus, we're able to handle all those. Yeah, question. And by the way, if you can come up and use the mic, come up and use the mic. Otherwise, I'll repeat them for the audio. And all the sessions have been recorded. You'll be able to pull the decks down or the recordings down. And so it's important for us to repeat the questions if they're not at the mic. Why don't you go ahead since you're up there?
Just a quick one. The data, custom data that you have is stored in a separate little database that you created, or as a new set of tables? Or
it's stored in related tables in the project server databases. Yeah. So we don't, there's no point in building a separate database. We just make sure they're related. So for example, if they're storing task UIDs or project UIDs, we want them to be related, but they absolutely have to be in their own space and not conflicting.
So do you put them in published? You put them in draft? You put
depends.
Them in
sometimes published, sometimes reporting.
Okay.
The important thing is if you do cumulative updates and service packs, it's never going to touch those things because they're outside of the bounds of anything Microsoft would ever mess with. And that's something we've learned over the last 10 years of doing this, is that if you can't survive cumulative updates, you might as well get out of the business because you'll spend your whole life doing support. So we've been really careful to make sure that anytime we do this kind of work, we never change a Microsoft page, for example. We would never change the code on one of their dashboard web pages because that's just asking for trouble. So we try to obfuscate or keep away from that kind of thing.
How did you handle overtime?
Overtime. So they don't treat overtime the way that maybe a consulting organization would. If they work more than 40 hours a week, they just log it. But they don't have a concept. They're not a professional services org, so they're really dealing with healthcare, Medicare, insurance. And they don't carry overtime. But if you wanted to put overtime on the timesheet, you certainly could just go ahead and click on the button and do that. But
you said that you interfaced with a payroll system, correct?
Yeah. So the data ends up going up to
right. So if I'm an exempt employee, being in IT, I don't know anyone that works 40 hours in IT.
Really? Yeah, I agree.
I'm working 50, 60 hours a week.
Right.
I may want to know what the effort is on the project, but not necessarily report those many hours to
so yeah, we've had clients. I think I follow you.
How did you handle that?
So are you saying that in that case, would you? So what we've done for some clients is we've said report the hours you worked because we want to know, but we're going to normalize them down to 40 for finance because finance doesn't care about your 60-hour week. Your manager might care about it, you might care about it, but finance doesn't. So we would then normalize all that data down to 40 when we report it upstream. At Contoso here, they wanted the hours as they were reported. So, and does it get kind of at your question?
Well, it doesn't answer it because
Okay.
let's say I have a task, I spent 8 hours on that task.
Okay.
Did another task, I spent 3 hours on the same day, and I have that pattern throughout the week.
Okay.
You're saying you normalize it, so I already have a task that's a full day, another task that's beyond a full day. So how'd you treat that?
So for Contoso, the 11 hours a day would go up
It gets
to the
reported.
general ledger. They
Right.
wanted to know all of it. For other clients, what we've done, and probably still doesn't quite answer your question because I kind of see where you're going, it's, that we're just going to report 40 because that's all they care about. And the other, say, 15 hours that you did on that 3-hour-a-day task, for as far as the general ledger was concerned, they didn't care about it, so it effectively got dropped on the floor. But this company, they wanted everything, and there's no real concept of overtime, even though it is.
So what's the exact situation that you're trying to? I assume you got a scenario in your company where it needs to be treated a little differently than reporting all the hours.
It's because we have a lot of people that that are exempt that may work 45 hours a week. That's expected. But from a payroll standpoint, you're paid for 40 hours.
Right. Okay.
You're not going to submit a 40. If I'm going to interface with a payroll system, I'm not going to submit a 45-hour timesheet because then it's going to go up for for an approval for overtime.
Got it.
So
and
I'm
that's
expected to work that much more or less.
But they don't want to see it
I'm
on the
still
timesheet.
going to get paid for 40.
Right.
But I need to
Right.
know. But I need to know if I work 45, right, on my project. I need to know what the actual effort was.
Right. So your
one thing is
PM
getting
wants to
paid.
know there were 12 hours. Like, so let's say you did two tasks, 6 hours each. Right. So you had 12 hours for the day, but finance doesn't care about 12. They're going to pay you for 8.
Right.
So your team member, your project manager wants to know about the 12 hours because they want to know that that's how much work got done.
right.
So again, what we would do for organizations where finance wants 40-hour timesheets from people is that we would take those 2 6s and turn them into 4s. They get normalized down so that we
Gotcha.
reported to finance 8 hours, but the 12 hours still went to the PM. Does that make sense? And so when I said normalized, that's what I meant. I meant you'd kind of do the ratio. If it was 8 and 3, you'd have some fractions there, but it would end up being a 40-hour week, and your hours just get kind of shrunk, effectively, so that they're in the same proportion, but they meet 40, they meet finance's needs.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, I didn't answer that more clearly the first time.
Just a quick question about investment levels. So from a technical standpoint, there's a lot of customization you've done there. How much investment was there sort of scale-wise in actually deploying those solutions to Contoso? Like how much did it, I don't know about costs, but how much effort was involved?
That's a good question. In terms of integration and customizations that we've done, this is definitely on the larger end because there was a lot there, and it was kind of like peeling an onion. We learned more and more as we went along. We wrote up a big functional spec at the beginning, but we found out there's a lot more that didn't get covered in the functional spec. So it was definitely on the larger end. I think hours-wise, it would have to be, I don't know, in the 700-hour range, probably to do all of it. I would guess somewhere. It was a big number because, and part of it was we redid things many times. We get requirements, then we get different requirements, then we get another set of requirements. So I think in terms of if you pick one of these items, whether it was a consultative bid or obviously the package ones are just install them and done. The more things like dynamic cell locking maybe and those types of things with a clear set of requirements now and having done all this work before, generally what we do when we do integrations with back office systems is we bring some code to the table, like a PeopleSoft integration, for example. We've done PeopleSoft integrations 10, 15 times, so we can walk into the client with some code that's 60% done. We just make sure we have some, the legal agreement set up so we can take it back out. We don't want anything updated. We want to build a work product for our client, but take that work product that we came in with back with us. We don't want to having it end up being licensed to them. So that ends up shortening up the dollars and the time and a lot of significantly. Yeah, so we could do the same thing, I would think, with these consultative solutions, and we did all the heavy lifting and figured out the hard way how to deal with time hanging below the timesheet and to make it paint and show correctly. Went through all the headaches the first time on that, so it would be a lot easier to do the second time. Thanks for the question.
Hi. I understand you said that all timesheets had to be approved at some point.
Yes.
What happens if, and I assume that's probably going to happen on a Monday,
Yeah,
What
typically.
happens if the manager gets run over by a bus on Monday morning?
Yeah, so they can delegate a different approver, or they can simply have someone go in as a delegate and handle it. That's a good question. We haven't really run over that one 100% yet because we're rolling out, and that one hasn't come up. But I think the solutions would be either to have someone delegate as that person and do the approval, or they would just have a flexible approval routing thing where they could route it to a different person.
So will that be the resource that would be responsible for doing that, or can another manager jump in?
It would be another manager. Yeah, it would have to be another manager. So they can't have people at their same peer level, I think, submit their timesheets for them, or I'm sorry, approve their timesheet. It has to be somebody that's designated as a timesheet approver. So yeah, it would be there another team lead, for example.
Okay.
It would just be a different team lead that took it on.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
A quick one. I like the feature that you implemented that if the time period is closed, I only want to adjust one timesheet. Is that a package or is the cost consulting?
That is something that we haven't packaged, but it probably could be. We haven't thought about tearing that out into an individual thing, but it requires the ability to have everything controlled dynamically. So that was that dynamic cell locking was one of the things that we said was
that is based on dynamic cell.
Yeah, that's what sort of underpins it, because we can say all timesheets are open. We're going to lock them by either business logic or by someone pushing a button somewhere. So the ability to kind of go back and open that one timesheet was just that timesheet period's open as far as project's concerned, but it's locked as far as our business logic is concerned, and we unlock it for that one resource. So we know what the resource UID, we know what timesheet period it's for. If they go to that timesheet period and they're that resource UID, then we just let them edit it. So it depends on that dynamic locking.
Oh,
piece.
so actually behind the scene in the system time period and the server setting, time period open close, that's still open, right?
Yeah, they're all open for all time.
Oh, for you, if we use your solution,
yes,
everything will.
Then if you close them, then you'd kind of get in the way. You'd be getting in the way of the dynamic cell locking bits if you close them. You could do it, but you wouldn't be able to. So if then someone said, hey, I need to do a post closing, I need to open up a timesheet for Jay for last week, we would think it was open, but project would think it was closed, and that would actually get in the way. But that's all done via business logic and sort of software. So every cell you look in, we kind of go, can you edit this cell, yes or no? Well, if it's a departmental task and the dates range is closed out, no. If it's not closed out, yes. If it's a leave time field, never. If it's last week and that time period's closed, no. Right? So it's all done on a kind of situation by situation basis.
Okay. So how about do you have any solution for at the month end, there are a bunch of guys, they fill out the timesheet, they click save, they didn't click submit.
Right.
That's like drive those admins crazy.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So do you have anything, just say, okay, I pick a bunch of users, submit for them, just click. Do a kind of mass submit, we call it, that's kind of idea we have.
So kind of look for all the unsubmitted timesheets and then just use the PSI to submit them or something like that?
Yeah.
Is there a submit option in the PSI?
In the PSI?
Yeah, it'd be something that you'd need to look at, do some, impersonation just to make sure that, you could do it, but I don't see why you couldn't.
Exactly. So I was thinking about you delegate, not impersonate as that guy, and then submit that particular timesheet.
Right.
Yep.
One of the nice things about this is that if a team member has forgotten to submit a timesheet, there's a lot of times what finance gets involved in there at Contoso is they have like 20 incidents on a weekly basis, and 15 of them are people that just forgot to push submit. I do it sometimes. I have my office manager go, you didn't submit your timesheet. And I'm like, I did that thing last night at 3 in the morning. I didn't submit. So
I did it this week.
They used to set up post closings for that in their old timesheet system because they had to actually open the period up for them to submit it. At least with Project Web App, if you've got a closed period, you can still go submit your timesheet for that period even if it's closed. So they don't have to now do post closings for 90% of what they used to do it for, which is this annoying thing about someone who forgot to submit their timesheet. So you could at least, your other alternative would be to send notes out to those people and say, hey, submit your timesheet, and they could go do it without, whether they're using our bits or whether they're just using Microsoft Project, they could still submit that.
Let's do something.
Well, actually, if the period was closed, I'm not sure they could submit it.
I don't.
But all of our periods are open, so they can.
Right.
No. Actually, when you close that time period, the Microsoft will report to you, say, so and so didn't submit.
Right.
They give you a list to say, this
Right.
guy is the violators.
Right.
And deal
Exactly.
with them.
In fact, our Contoso client has a frequent violators list or something like that. They're building a report for. So they want to know the people that are constantly causing problems. So we're keeping track of those timesheets that got submitted but had errors, and then the ones that didn't get submitted on time. And when the period closes, we go look and say, okay, Stacy went in and pushed the close period button. Now let's go find out all the timesheets that should have been submitted that weren't, or the ones that didn't get created even, and we keep a list. And then they can
And we
look
even
at that
send
report.
emails out when she closes it. They
Right.
go look right away who hasn't submitted their timesheet. So then we submit or send emails out to all the offending people and their managers, and
Right.
so.
Yeah. And the other thing is, do you have any solution for to extract the rate? Because in Microsoft, the resource rate is time-phased. It's pretty hard to get the
Right.
current rate.
Right.
So, we almost have to have another separate table to manage the current rate, right? In order to integrate the timesheet to financial
Yeah,
system.
it can be that way. We've had professional services customers that wanted to have just all kinds of flexibility. They wanted to have a resource needed to have 5 rates on this project and 5 other rates on another project. And then, of course, what Microsoft gives you out of the box doesn't really cut it, so you end up having to build a user interface to allow them to define those rates and when they're effective and what they are and for what work they're doing. It gets to be kind of a lot of work. And I think Project is still not really sort of slated to be a PSA, a professional services automation application, as well as it does other things like innovation management and new product development. So I think it can get dicey, but you can do it. And
Even
then
the rate, there's no easy query you can run against database to get the rate, because
Correct.
You have to call PSI to get the
Yeah.
next rate.
Same with calendars. Calendar exceptions are
same
another
thing with
one.
calendar exceptions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So what we've done in those cases, a lot of times we go off and run a process on a daily, weekly basis, and we get that data using the PSI, and we store it in tables we can get at, because some of that data is binary, and there's nothing you can do to tear it apart without.
you have to run the
Yeah. So
batch job.
I think we did that exact thing with calendar exceptions here, because there are certain Mondays that are holidays, and when a Monday's a holiday at Contoso, they don't close the week till Tuesday. So the automatic closing the period down at 5 o'clock on Monday, we don't want to do it. So we had to go out and write some PSI code to go get the calendar exceptions, log them in a table we could get at, and then we use that data when we're looking at weeks to decide if we're going to do that automated closing or not.
Sure. And we wouldn't have had to store them in a table, just thought it was overkill getting them all the time too.
Yeah.
So
I mean, holidays don't change that often. They get set once a year pretty much, so that was kind of what we can go do it once and just keep the data around.
Okay, thank you. Very good job.
Oh, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
I was just going to ask you real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
For your workflow solution for inserting a row, I might have missed it. I was trying to pay attention.
There's a lot of data, sorry.
One thing I'd like to see is a user to be able to request a new task for a new departmental task. Was that one of the workflow capabilities, or was it just adding an existing task?
No, you could do both. You could click insert row here, and then if
Yeah.
you clicked on request, that was saying give me one that I don't already have. So it gave you this big list. I can't leave it on the screen all that long because of this. I didn't get all the data cleaned up. But it's a long list of things that your customer doesn't already own that one. So you just pick the one you want, and there's actually two options here. One is, and I didn't get to talk about all this. One is there's the big list of things that my customer currently doesn't get access to. This is the one I want, or I don't even see anything on this list at all. That's what I want. So then there's a request. Then you can type in a name of a departmental task you think you should have that's not already out there. And then that would be a request that would, again, go through your team lead first here, and then it would go to the finance people. And they would say, you know what, we should build a departmental task for this. Maybe it's in that IT support project, but it's a different type of task. They would create the task right there in the DBT manager and assign that cost center, and off you go. So you have 3 options. One, insert an existing, grab one that you don't have access to and get someone to approve it for your cost center, or get a completely new one that you don't have access to. And all that stuff was done before with like filling out a labor code form in Word and mailing it to somebody with a
And then even the close too. The close starts another workflow,
Right.
Shut one
because you might not want it anymore, and it might be, oh yeah, it's applicable for this cost center that they don't get access to this DPT anymore, and that kicks off another workflow. I mean, it's not quite as interesting as the other ones, but same concept.
Yeah.
That's one of the challenges we have is for our operational plans throughout the year, managing remaining work hours and how project manages scheduling over a period of time and giving people short-term. I love what you've got going on with this workflow process for.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of options going forward for people. It might not be a departmental task, it might be, but getting at the insert row menu and being able to work with it and put your own items in here and then have some rich dialogues hanging out behind it, and business logic is good.
And you're saying that's not an existing product that right now that's on a consulting?
We haven't productized that yet, but we should look into that too. It might be pretty simple to do. Just give you an interface to say, well, what is it you need to add to the menu, and what do you want to do? Maybe we could figure out some easy way to do that, or either that, or
Just be a way to get some maybe simple data collection and get it so that it's easily put on the timesheet.
and then maybe get the workflow stuff established would be another part. You might say, this menu item has a workflow associated with it, right? I want to be able to establish a workflow and help make that happen.
You got one customer in line waiting right now, so.
What's that?
Said you got one customer waiting in line right now.
Okay. Well, by all means, send us a note too. We'd love to talk with you about that because some of these things sometimes are easier to do just to get involved and help get the requirements and get the solution implemented and then leave you guys with it. Are you a partner? Are you a customer?
Customer.
Okay. Who are you with? Avnet. Okay. Here.
We're actually right here in Phoenix.
You are okay.
I'll run it down. You can.
Yeah. Let me get.
I don't have a business card.
That's okay. I'll have Mark. We'll just hand you one. There's one of mine and one of Mark's, so you got both ends of it. So yeah, by all means, get a hold of us. We can talk more about that. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming.
I'm looking at trying to do this myself with Blended Workflow Foundation. One of the challenges I faced was creating a workflow within a timesheet.
Right.
That's how the heck
Yeah, I know. There's no real help on it. You can't kind of go out to Google or something and have someone tell you how to do it. Maybe we should, if we're feeling swanky someday, we should maybe publish some of that stuff and get it out there.
In my spare time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have safe travel back.